Hi, welcome everybody. This is Morgan from the Sanctuary. We're just waiting for a few more people to hop on before we get started.
Hello.
Hey Morgan, this is Christy. I'm at one of the command pods with the C-Sketch crew.
Hello.
It's Eric Ponsley, CINMS.
Eric, was that you?
Yep.
Oh, hi. This is Morgan here from the Sanctuary.
How are you?
Maureen, you got me as well. Ryan.
Oh, hi, Ryan.
Shoot. And this is Brandon Link with the Coast Guard Los Angeles Long Beach on the line.
Hi, Brandon. Welcome on.
Hi, Julie Bursack just joined.
Hi, Julie. Hey, hey, Ryan. This is Sean at the Sanctuary. Just for your information, we're going to probably cover education issues and ideas first, and then research second. So I know you're off-site, so your choice if you want to stay on or come back and join us.
Actually, what I think I'm going to do is I'll stay for the whole thing and chime in because I lost the whole time anyway. But I'm going to check into my room because right now they were going to open it at 12. So let me check in and then I'll call back in.
Thank you.
All right, sounds good. Bye.
Sean, this is Julie. I have another in-class presentation at 12:30, so I'm just going to give the first 25 minutes or so, and then I have to jump off. I can join back in about 1:15.
Good to know. Yeah, that's we're going to do education stuff first, so we'll take advantage of having you here right now.
Okay.
Sean and Morgan, this is Janet. Do we want to give it a couple more minutes while people are still joining?
Hi, Janet. Yeah, maybe 1 or 2 more minutes.
All right, sounds good.
This is Kip. What are we supposed to be seeing on our screen?
Right now, you should just see a screen that says Marine Shipping Working Group Research and Education Outreach Webinar. Is that what you're seeing?
No, I have connected to go to meeting, your meeting's on the go.
How about now?
No change.
Is there a, Kip, this is Janet, is there a chance that your browser opened up a separate window that's the one where Morgan's information is posted?
Let me check.
I know for me it popped up a different window that I needed to click on to get to the meeting viewer. And failing that, Kip, if you can't get into the webinar, I think Morgan will be using, referencing the education outreach matrix and also the research matrix that she sent out, what, 10 days ago or so.
Okay,
so those are good. Those are good backups. Oh, good. Okay.
Well, I didn't get this webinar. I got the other things. But I'll
okay. Okay. Well, it's 12:04, so Morgan and Sean, if it's okay with you, I'll get us started.
Okay, sounds good.
All right. So hi, everyone. This is Janet Thompson from Kearns & West. I am here to open up the webinar and then really turn the show over to Morgan and Sean and the rest of you. So the main purpose of this webinar is to review the two matrices that the Sanctuary put together, one of education and outreach actions that have been conducted to date and the other on research activities that have been conducted to date or suggested but maybe not fully funded. And we'll run through all of that. The intent on having this webinar today instead of conducting this during meeting 4 is that we had hoped to save time at meeting 4 and really get the information sharing completed prior to the meeting. Today we'll spend about an hour each, first on the education and outreach ideas, and then secondly an hour on research. And Morgan is recording this webinar so that anybody who's not able to join for the 2 hours now can hopefully catch up and listen to the webinar prior to our meeting on October 7th and 8th. The other reason we're doing this now is that we're hoping that for those of you who are able to participate in the homework assignment, you can use the information we discussed today to inform your ideas or revised ideas on education outreach and research prior to submitting them as part of your homework assignment on C-Sketch. So what we plan to do today, we'll start with the overview of ideas from the Sanctuary, and Morgan and Sean will probably here and there ask for additional input from those of you on the phone and any clarifications on the information that's in the matrices. We will see if anybody has questions about the information or new information. There may be cases in which the Sanctuary knew of certain information, but you know of additional education and outreach or research ideas that have tiered off what they have in the matrix, and that's information we'd like to have. We will ask you if you have any more information that you need on these topics before meeting 4, if there's any additional information gathering we can do on the staff side before we get to October 7th and 8th, we are happy to do so. And then finally, if time provides, if there's time available, we'll ask you for any new education outreach and research ideas that you may have. So we want to focus on information sharing and Q&A, but if there's time at the end, we're happy to start the discussion on new ideas that you might have. So with that, any questions from those of you on the webinar about what we're doing and why today? Okay, all quiet. Morgan and Sean, I'll turn it over to you.
Hi, this is Julie. I'm sorry, I got dropped. I just called back in.
Welcome back.
Thanks, Janet. Hi, everybody. This is Morgan from the Sanctuary. Thanks for jumping on this webinar with us today. I know in the last email that I sent all of you, I sent you quite a bit of information, including 2 documents that outline the education and outreach and research work to date. And so this webinar is just to give us a chance to walk through those documents together, answer any questions you have. Yeah, so I'll start off with the research, with the education and outreach. Are you guys all seeing my screen okay, seeing the matrix that I sent out to you?
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
Great. Yeah, so I'll just explain a little bit how this is laid out. As you can see on this far left column, we have a lot of different education and outreach and communication strategies that the sanctuary has employed over, I guess, since 2007. And then on the top, you'll see the different column headings: the description, date, message, primary audience, evaluation, feedback, and notes, questions, and next steps. And the message, audience, and evaluation feedback columns, I think, are really important. They're thought about a lot by communication professionals when trying to think about how to communicate strategically. I like to think of them within the context of a strategic communication framework called the GAME plan. That's an acronym that stands for goals, audience, message, and engagement. And so goals, or what do you want to see as a result of your efforts? These should be specific, realistic, and measurable, rather than just simply raising awareness. What kind of specific attitude or behavior changes do we want to see among our target audiences? So once you have your goals outlined, who's your audience? Who do you need to speak to in order to achieve your goals? Message, what will you say to your audience to convince them to act as you wish them to? And then engagement, having decided whom your audiences are and what to say to them, how will you get those messages to them? And so in this matrix, oh, sorry, I keep the research one, hope the education one. We tried to identify who our message and our audiences are for these different outreach projects, and then evaluation really relates back to our goals. If we're looking at what was the goal we were trying to achieve with this, when we're evaluating it, did we actually achieve that goal? So one of the examples that we have listed here are local notice to mariners. This is a broadcast that goes out weekly, and we use this a lot to notify mariners of the voluntary slow speed zones that we have in effect. So right here is a map showing the one that we currently have in effect. As you all know, this is a voluntary measure, and we ask mariners via a local notice to mariners. This is an example of one that came out in May when we started broadcasting it for this season. This is the text that goes along with it. It's recommending to look out for whales, and then also a voluntary slow speed zone within the traffic separation scheme. And then if you scroll down to the bottom, that map is included as well. And so looking back to our matrix, when we get to the evaluation feedback column, as many of you know, compliance with the voluntary slow speed zones has been low. And so a question is this related to our education and outreach strategy? You know, are we targeting the wrong audience to let them know about this, or does it really relate to just the fact that the measure itself is voluntary? And so these are important questions that I think would be good for the working group to discuss. And also people who are coming from the shipping industry perspective, there are so many people involved in the shipping industry, it can be pretty complicated for somebody who isn't directly involved. And so it would be good to know what kind of messages do we need to get to what kind of audiences, to which kind of specific people, to get the type of behavior change that we are looking for. And so that's kind of one of the questions, next steps and questions over here. How do we improve cooperation and compliance with the no messaging and the local notice to mariners? I'm not going to go through every single row in all these matrices, but if you have specific questions about any of these individual projects, feel free to stop me and ask questions, and Sean can also provide information and some of that historical context about these different strategies that we've been using. So another one that we've employed is the use of Whale Alert and Spotter Pro, which are two mobile applications that allow people to record whale sightings. Spotter Pro is specifically for trained whale observers, and Whale Alert is for the public. There was a push a little while ago to try to get the shipping industry to use Whale Alert to record sightings, but adoption has been pretty low. And so the question is, how do we expand adoption and use, and who is the target audience for expansion? So again, just questions that I think would be really valuable to have all of your perspective and input on, since you guys are the experts. So you see we've done some brochures and pocket guides, some infographics. One that we worked on with the Pacific Merchant Shipping Association is a whale poster. I can pull this up so you guys can check it out. I don't know if you've all had the chance to look at it, but I think 10,000 copies of this poster were printed to put on the bridge of ships, and it's the main messaging here is to look out for whales and also to report sightings. So farther down, there is an email address that you can report sightings to, but unfortunately, there's pretty much been, I think, only one commercial operator, one NOAA vessel, and one whale watch operator that have actually reported whales via this email address. So again, we're not really seeing the behavior change that we want to see. So what do we need to do differently, whether that's changing our messaging, changing what audience we're targeting, changing the way that we are engaging with people to get that shift in behavior.
So Morgan, this is Kip. So do you want thoughts now, or hold them to the end, or how do you want to work it?
Sure. If you have a thought, go for it.
Just on that one particularly, of how do you change the behavior? A famous Coast Guard example was where were most oil spills in the country or in the world under the Coast Guard's old data system? And most oil spills were off of the bulge of Africa at 0 degrees latitude, 0 degrees longitude, because it was a field that no one seemed to look at, so all the oil spill people never filled it in. So that's where the international date line crosses the equator. So they just left it blank, nobody cared. And then when the Coast Guard got its new data system, new being 10 or 15 years ago, you were able to print where the oil spills were using the lat longitude if it was filled incorrectly. And there was an instant change in behavior that people filled that in, because then they got a cool chart of where oil spills were. So my comment on the how do you change the behavior is the ship has to get something back for the time and effort it puts into sending the email. Do you want a busy bridge watchstander to stop looking for whales while he or she submits the email? That could be a bad behavior, and probably is one of the reasons they're not doing it, is the bridges are minimally staffed. So this is one more admin requirement for which they get, from their perspective, no value back. So, in our list of things to do would be, if the ship actually reported a whale on its path, would they then a month later get a little chart that says, here's where the whales are, and maybe then some of the lines say, ooh, here's where concentrations are, I'm going to move my track line over 20 miles. Just a thought. Give feedback to the ships.
Yeah, I think that's a really valuable point, and something that we've kind of thought about with the use of Whale Alert as well, because right now when you report a sighting on Whale Alert, you don't get kind of an immediate feedback of where the sightings are. You can log on to a website in your browser and look at them, but perhaps that feedback would not only be valuable for shippers, but it probably would incentivize other people to use the app as well. So I think, yeah, that's a good point. I'm writing down some notes about it, and also, yeah, thank you. Any other comments or questions on anything that I've gone over so far? Great. So farther down a little bit.
I'm sorry, this is TL. Can you hear me?
TL. Yep, I can hear you.
On the question of the poster, we had some issues with it from the beginning in that, one, the lack of a feedback loop. We think that's absolutely critical for long-term success of any of these programs.
Yeah.
But the poster itself still seems to focus on reporting of dead whales. We've always thought that it was unfortunate that there wasn't a number dedicated to reporting whales in the Santa Barbara Channel. In addition to that, there's a question of whether or not crews actually have access to email as they're coming in, much less their ability to do that with their other responsibilities. So I think there's a feasibility of, is this the right technology even? And should we be looking at other ways to communicate with the vessels?
Right, that's a really good point, and something, yeah, I want to know too. And also, I think it's important for this group to consider, what's the value of of these different ships reporting whale sightings, how can that information be used, and how do we get that information back to the shipping companies as well? I'm curious, do you have thoughts on a better way to collect the sightings information aside from email?
You know, there's some discussions going on. I'm not the lead on those, so I'll leave those to others.
Okay. Can you share with us who those others might be so maybe we could follow up with them?
I hope I'm not talking out of school, but Kip, John, and Barsky and I have been sharing some emails. John Ukaras, I'm sorry. That was a flashback to a former life.
And actually,
years ago.
I'm sorry. John posted his idea to C-Sketch, so now it's in the open.
Oh, okay, great. Glad to hear that.
Kip, this is Janet. Thanks for the reminder to drive everyone to C-Sketch to participate in the forums, and thanks to you and John Ugras for starting to do that already. And sorry to whoever I cut off. Go ahead.
That's okay. That's John Kalmakidis. I was just going to say that, you know, our experience with doing some of the ship ride-alongs were also that, you know, among the half dozen different ships that we worked with, it seemed clear there wasn't necessarily one solution that worked for every ship. Some with especially younger crews seemed interested in things like an app. Others cited use of email, and others talked about the fact they did the weather reporting and was there a way to include it there. So it seemed clear just from talking with the different ships that it might not be one solution makes everyone happy, and was a little bit specific sometimes to the ships or the companies themselves.
That's great information to know, John, and perhaps then what this ends up looking like is that mariners can submit sightings through a variety of methods, and then the challenge is just integrating the data that's coming in from those multiple sources so that it's all ending up in one place. Maybe that makes more sense.
Exactly.
Great. Yeah, as I said, I'm not going to go through everything that's included in this matrix. You all have access to it, and so I would encourage you to take a peek at it as you're thinking about these ideas, and also, you know, keep in mind kind of the strategic communication perspective on things. Some of the others, just really quickly, so there have been some presentations. We have a web and social media presence, press releases, and also there's some information included in the Coast pilot. And so, with that review, is there anything that we might have missed that you all know of education and outreach related to the issues we're talking about that isn't included in this matrix? Or Janet, I don't know if you want to open it up to talk about possibly new ideas.
Morgan, I was thinking I think your first question about is there anything else that should be on here that's been missing, or Morgan, whether, I'm not sure if you have some pieces on the education and outreach matrix where you needed more information from people to get feedback on how well things worked. That would also be productive if people have ideas on that.
I am curious in terms of scheduling, if a message needs to get to a shipping company that would impact scheduling, for example, a slow speed zone or a different route or something like that, who are the people that need to know about that, and are we in communication with them?
Well, hearing silence, this is Kip. We contact every agent in the ports every day, 365 days a year, to get the ship schedules. And I've got an email bang list of all those folks where we push out information to them The information I classically push out is when Walter and the Vandenberg crowd are shooting rockets, and the boosters are going to drop, and the Air Force has, blocked off a section of ocean. So it's transmitted a bunch of different ways, but I've got, as I said, an email bang list and get a bunch of thank you, we'll pass it to our ships. When I get a specific whale sighting, I've done that also and get a bunch of thank you. And when there's a specific sighting, it's close in, we generally tell the pilots to tell the outbound ship, hey, there's a whale off of Point Vicente or whatever it happens to be. That is extremely limited, but as is mentioned with the dock walk item, that getting information to and from the agent is a good way. You're not going to get a hold of the ship. They're not going to answer the phone or something like that.
So it's really the agents that are the important audience for scheduling messaging.
For scheduling, yes, and messaging, yes.
But in terms of discussing changes of schedules, obviously a different audience, the shipping industry, which might be representatives in foreign countries.
Oh no, that's I was thinking very myopically.
Yeah, no, your point's well taken. If we want to get in touch with the immediate, the agents are the best people to go through. But if we're talking about long-term behavioral changes or changes in schedules themselves, that's going to have to go back through the companies. And
Julian,
I think there is a good conduit of information going back and forth. You have had good participation from the shipping industry.
This is Julie, and to me, I'd like to understand the company piece for it. If we know we have whales in the area for a certain season, and we're trying to have compliance with the voluntary slowdown, that would mean that companies would schedule the ships knowing that they need to slow down from Point Conception down to the port, and so that could be built into the schedule with the company.
No,
is that correct?
Possibly. But you have to understand that the schedule is not a unidirectional move from China to LA Long Beach. It also involves the next port of call, which is most likely Oakland or Seattle Tacoma, and there your flexibility in scheduling becomes far more restricted.
Okay. So if we know if there's we're looking for voluntary compliance from June through September or October for this recommended slowdown to 12, and the different ports know that, could they proactively build their schedule in for that? I mean, I understand sometimes schedules change and then they've got to make up time, but I mean, the point is just to know that you're going through a hot spot during a couple of season. So
you already have seen greatly reduced speeds in the Santa Barbara Channel over the last decade. So that movement is already in that direction. Maybe not for whale or air quality issues as you guys would like, but for simple economics of burning less fuel. But the reality is ships are going slower through the channel. Your goal is a specific speed reduction, which I will be honest, I don't honestly get at this point in time. To me, the goal here seems to injure whales less rather than avoiding ship strikes. I would suggest that there's an inherent choice in the approach that you've taken, which is increase watch, try to avoid ship strikes, or just blindly slow down and hope for the best. I think you've had a hard time selling the BSR because of the length and the breadth of the measure and the lack of any feedback of its effectiveness.
I think that we should potentially spend some time again. This is Zach from NRDC. Hi, everybody. Nice to be on this call. For the 7th and 8th meeting, if we can set aside some time, we heard an entire presentation from Greg Silber showing that speed reductions leads to a decrease in the incidence of strikes, period. So when they set the speed of a certain level along the Atlantic coast, that produced that
I'm sorry, sir, but Mr. Silber never said that.
Well, this is why we need to clear this up at that meeting, at the 7th and 8th, because there's still some confusion then as to what the results of what happened off the Atlantic coast actually produced. Scientifically, we've got the data. I'd like for everyone to be on the same page as to what that is. And if I have it wrong, I want to be corrected. Thank you.
This is Janet. I understand, and we'll flag that for a new discussion on the 7th and 8th.
And this is Kathy Metcalf. Sorry I got on a little bit late, but I want to support what TL just said. But I agree, Zach. We all need to be sure that we're reading Greg's presentation correctly. What I believe Greg's research showed is that there was a reduction of fatal or mortal ship strikes, not necessarily a drop in ship strikes. And part of the problem we've had on the East Coast is the data set is so small, you really can't make any generalized conclusions on the impact of the SMAs and voluntary DMAs on the East Coast. So there's been nothing done to separate ships from whales on the East Coast, but rather to agree that an injured whale is better than a dead one.
Kathy, this is Janet. I'm wondering if I can work with you and or TL and Zach to make sure we have the right set of questions teed up for Greg for a presentation on the 7th and 8th. Are you guys amenable to a quick email follow-up at some point in the next week or two on this?
Absolutely.
Kathy says yeah.
Great, thank you.
This is Julie. I'm sorry, I have to get off the call, but I'll follow up with Morgan. I'll try to get back on later on after I get done with this presentation. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay. Morgan, did you have any additional questions? I know we sort of jumped off your question about scheduling and how to get the word out about rerouting and scheduling issues and slowing. Did you need more follow-up on that piece?
I guess within following up on what TL mentioned about reaching out to specific companies, are there specific people within like departments, I guess, in terms of just narrowing it down in terms of who needs to be in contact with? I don't know if that, sorry if that was a little bit unclear.
To some extent, from the companies that have previously participated, you have those contacts already in place.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure those are the same contacts that we gave you, or pretty close to it. And we're in contact with all of our member companies, and we can certainly increase that outreach to non-member companies through cooperation with people like Kathy.
Okay, great. Thanks. Janet, I think that's all the specific questions I have. Sean, or do you have any questions?
This is Christy. This is Morgan. Maybe you could also clarify. I know there's still some questions that you have. Do you want those, or if people have responses to them or thoughts, could they add them into C-Sketch? I know there's been several forums created in C-Sketch, and there is a education one and a research one. Would it be best to go to that forum to respond to some of these?
Yeah, I would definitely encourage everybody to check out the forums. There is one dedicated specifically to education and outreach, and I can post a few specific follow-up questions in there if anybody has more information to share.
Great. While we're on the education and outreach piece, does anybody else have either additional clarifying questions for the sanctuary about some of these measures or additional information needs on what's been done to date before we move into meeting 4? What? Okay. Or
And this is Sean. Just sort of said another way, this is our best attempt to capture everything we've done to date. And so if we're missing something that people on the phone are aware of that's been ongoing, let us know. We really want a comprehensive list of what we've employed to date. And of course, and we welcome people to fill in any details and share their ideas on the spreadsheet, which is posted on CSketch, because this is a really good record that tracks from the original advisory council advice we received in 2009 to the present. And we want to make sure that record's complete and reflective of all the hard efforts and investment that many people on the phone have been making. You know, I want to give a shout out to the Coast Guard for helping with the local notice to mariners every year and working with us to get that out. And so we want to make sure this is up to date and complete.
This is John. There are a couple of things I can either I can fill in details on later. I think both since I see kind of Spotter Pro and Whale Alert on here, there are a couple of efforts similar like that should probably be worth listing there that a couple of other parties have in place. And then I would also suggest, and I can provide the details, that I think some of the ship ride-along efforts we've done in the past and would like to see expanded and continued, you know, fall under this. While they gather research, I think they also provide an important outreach activity, so they should probably be something I can help fill in here. So there are at least a couple of things I see that I can help add to this that I think are missing at this point.
That's great. Thank you,
Super
John.
helpful. Thanks. Okay, if we've exhausted your communal ideas on anything that may have been missed from this matrix to date, does anybody have ideas that have come to you over the course of the last couple of weeks or even today reviewing this matrix so far about new education and outreach ideas that haven't been attempted to date but may be useful in this case?
This is Kathy Metcalf. I've been giving some thought. The West Coast is obviously not the only place where work is going on to try and keep whales and ships in different places. There are, most of you, particularly you research folks, there's a lot of work going on in the Mediterranean. There's work going on, I think, in Australia and New Zealand, obviously here in the U.S. And my point is, this has become an international issue. Now, the tactical piece of it is unique to the geography, but what we're trying to accomplish is not, and that is to get a message out to ships that there are living marine resources that may or may not be in the way of the ship, and there's certain things that can be done, or certain best practices that can be done. That leads me to just, and I suggest we just put this at the end of a list of potential outreach. The International Maritime Organization has something called GISIS, which is a global information system. It's off their website. You've got to sign up for it and get a password. But the fact that this is becoming a well-discussed international issue, that may be ultimately a nice place to collect the information and have it accessible to people on ships. So just a footnote, I think we've got a long way to go before we get IMO to take this on as a separate section of their database and reporting system, but it is a possibility that we could actually reach internationally with this.
Thanks, Kathy. We're adding it to the list.
This is TL. A number of years ago, there was an attempt by an oil company to come up with a marine mammal sighting program and to actually provide an educational forum. Sean, you recall that, right? I think it was done through the Cabrillo Aquarium.
I'm not sure if you were asking me, Sean.
Yeah,
kind of ringing a bell. Sort of in that same vein, I've approached some of the oil service industry companies in the channel to get them interested in using Whale Alert because they have a regular run between the rigs nearly every day, and so just trying to capture all those eyes and ears that are on the water, and there's some interest in them adopting Whale Alert, but that might be a little bit different than what you're thinking of.
Well, and this is really an educational forum, and I'm thinking, you know, the problem has always been you can't really get the guys on the ships to participate because they don't have the time while they're at dock. But you might be able to start with some of the people inside the buildings at the ports and sort of have a trickle-down effect, if you would, sort of increase awareness and build up from there. And as I recall, that program was fairly well fleshed out and comprehensive. And I think I'm still sworn to secrecy on it.
I know up in the Bay Area, and we can check on this, that Chevron had a pretty extensive training manual that included a living marine resource section.
That's the one I was referring to, Sean.
Right, okay. So yeah, we are aware of that.
Maybe we could dust that off, and maybe we could start doing little forums.
Okay.
So thank you for that, TL. That's helpful. Any other ideas on education and outreach at this point?
Hey, Kip, this is Sean. I remember an early discussion we had, earlier at the beginning of this process about your efforts to enhance AIS communication to make it two ways, and we've thought about this idea. I think it's being done on the East Coast already, and maybe you could share with the group where you are with that, and I think it'd be a pretty valuable, and it would be a new outreach effort, and maybe we could get some support for it and help employ it. And I'm using it because you're closer to what it is, and maybe you could describe for the group what we were talking about and where you think we could make some progress.
Sure. So AIS, Automated Identification System, is the transponder that all large vessels and towing vessels, passenger vessels of certain sizes have to have. So if you're familiar with an airplane has IFF, that's their transponder. This is the water version. When it came out, it was originally envisioned only for collision avoidance with ship-to-ship kind of communications, but people like yeses realized, hey, this is great, we can watch the picture too and watch the ships move around. The AIS has a text message transmit feature, so you can, just like you can text on your phone, you can basically send a text message that'll appear on a screen on the ship's bridge. The beauty of this is, remember that outside 25 miles from the ports, the watchstanders don't need to speak English. So if the Coast Guard puts out a broadcast that there are whales in such and so location, it's in one ear and out the other if the watchstander doesn't speak English. So our notion was, hey, if we can get permission to transmit on AIS from shore, we could transmit the whale sighting information, and if the watchstanders can't understand English, hopefully he or she would call somebody who could to say, hey, we got this little message down here, what's it say, and maybe we should do something. The problem is, well, and we have currently, the AIS unit we have on top of the building has this capability, and the one that we have in Santa Barbara has this capability, and in the next 6 months we're going to be replacing the one in Port San Luis with this capability. So that would give us basically 50 miles north of Port San Luis to 50 miles south of San Pedro, and out 50 or 100 miles, the ability to send text messages to the ships. So we applied to FCC and said, we have this great idea. And they said, great idea, but you're not a federal organization. And presently, the way the rules are written, only federal organizations can transmit on AIS. So the discussion I had with Sean, and I've had at the staff level informally with the Coast Guard, is neat idea. And so perhaps if the Marine Shipping Working Group recommends that this be a technology that we be allowed to use, we could get the power of NOAA, let's say, to say, hey, this organization is special. They run the only public-private partnership BTS in the country, in the same way that they're allowed to run radars and radios from shore, which normally you're not allowed to do. Let them also transmit on AIS. So the recommendation that Sean and I have is that the working group recommend we be granted a exemption to the FCC policy so we can use this technology.
Thanks, Kip. Any initial thoughts from those on the phone about this idea?
Kip, any idea of the schedule, what it would take to get that in place?
TL, the unit in the building is actually turned on. We just don't use it. The unit in Santa Barbara is literally flip the switch. We haven't flipped the switch because we don't have the ability to use it. We have used it successfully as a test mode. For example, sometimes we can't get communications with the ships when they're supposed to check in at 25 miles. And we've said, hey, let's test to make sure this thing works. We've said, hey, you're past 25 miles, check in with us, please. And they call us on the radio and say, oops, sorry, we had the volume turned down or we forgot or whatever. So we know it works. And another advantage of sending a text message rather than just reading, let's say, the latitude, longitude of a whale sighting is, again, that watchstander would need to write it down. If we broadcast it out, then all they have to do is read it. So it works, and we're paying for it because we bought it for BTS purposes. It would be a side benefit, no cost to anybody, if we were allowed to transmit the whale information.
And the FCC?
Yeah, they just came back and said, you're a private organization, you can't have it, period. Don't appeal. That's why we need to get some federal organization, would be the thought that I had with Sean, to go in and say, hey, these folks are special. Let them use it for this limited function. What FCC is afraid of is that Dairy Queen is going to advertise that ice cream cones are on sale. I mean, that's literally what they told us, is that if they let it get use from ashore, it would get abused. It's designed for collision avoidance, used by organizations like VTS's, but I think it's a natural extension to what we already do.
Okay. Color me frustrated.
Well, it sounds, Kip and Sean, it sounds like an item to add to our list of things to talk about on October 7th and 8th. So thank you for that, for teeing it up.
Yeah, quick question. Is this technology used by other VTSs? Correct me if I'm wrong. Are other VTSs managed by the Coast Guard?
I think they're doing it for whales on the East Coast, and they're broadcasting weather information up in Alaska. I don't know whether it's a real operational use or a test use. I just haven't explored it. But up in Alaska, because of the violent weather, just like the Coast Guard puts out urgent marine information broadcast by voice, they're doing it through AIS up there also.
Great, thanks.
And actually, just as a closer, so I mean, sometimes we've been talking about the dynamic management of ships. We see a whale pod or group of whales or whatever, and we would tell the ships, hey, there are whales in this position. Please, give them a 5-mile buffer or whatever. That could be broadcast by email. It could be broadcast by voice. This would be another way. And to my understanding of the ships and my talking with the ships, AIS is one of those things they watch all the time because collision avoidance is one of the main things that the watch is doing. So.
Kip, this is Christy. This is really helpful. I think it sounds like it's low cost, possibly pretty easy to implement. We just need to think about getting an exemption. So if you have more information on what we would need to do for that, feel free to pass that along too, and we can look into it.
Got it.
All right. Any other thoughts, questions, ideas on education and outreach before we move over to the research topic?
So, Janet, this is Sean. It kind of goes along the lines of providing feedback to industry that was mentioned earlier. On the East Coast and through the Stellwagen Bank Sanctuary and on the Northwest Coast, the Olympic Coast Sanctuary, those two sites in coordination and cooperation with the Coast Guard, they do send out letters to the heads of shipping companies regarding the ship, their company's behavior and track record with respect to, on the East Coast, the whale areas, the seasonal management areas, and the dynamic management areas, and then in the Olympic Coast regarding ship transits and tracks around the area to be avoided. That includes most of the Olympic Coast Sanctuary. We will bring examples of that direct outreach. It provides feedback to the companies on their ships and how they are interacting around the ATBA and the whale zones. This is something that we've thought about, and we actually have mocked up a couple potential draft letters. In both cases, they are signed by the sanctuary superintendent and the captain of the port, and they have good graphics. I think they're good graphics and information on ships in relationship to those special zones. And I think most importantly, following this direct outreach, which happens on a quarterly or annual basis, it really has opened up communication lines with the companies, and most importantly, there's been a change in cooperation and compliance noted following this direct outreach. So it's another example that staff can provide to the working group. It's been employed elsewhere. It's not precedent setting, and it seems to have great effect. So we'll bring examples of that. We'll provide examples of that to the working group to see what you all think about it.
That's great. Thank you, Sean. Okay, let's move along to the research topic. Morgan, I assume you'll switch the webinar screen, and those of you who don't have access to the webinar screen will look at the research matrix that Morgan sent out. And Morgan, I'll let you tee it up.
Great, thank you, Janet. All right, so you should all see the research summary matrix now. And again, just going over how this is organized. Over on the left, it's recommendations from the SAC 2009 Ship Strike Report, which all of you received back at our first meeting. This one, reducing sort of ship strikes on large cetaceans in the Santa Barbara Channel region and Channel Islands National Marine Sanctuary, recommendations and case studies. This is recommended by our Sanctuary Advisory Council, which is where all of your recommendations are going to go at the end of the Marine Shipping Working Group process. So if I just scroll down really quick, we can look at these specific recommendations. And you'll see our first one is to continue and expand research and monitoring efforts, and there are 6 specific things listed here, A through F. If you haven't if you haven't taken a look at these recommendations recently, I would recommend checking them out. As we've mentioned over and over, we're looking to build upon what's been done before, and this is really one of the key documents that we're looking to build upon. But that is basically where this column came from. And the first one is improved monitoring efforts to track whale distribution spatially and temporarily within the sanctuary within and in close proximity to shipping lanes. Since 2009, a good amount of progress has been made. As you can see, we've done acoustic monitoring, aerial monitoring, photographic monitoring, and then also opportunistic sighting. One of the things that I know our in-house research staff is really interested in is aerial monitoring. Sean, do you want to just give a brief description of what we've done so far?
Sure. So we have over a decade of experience flying the Channel region and the islands, and counting whales, counting boats, counting different visitor uses around the islands. Very well established program. It has waxed and waned with funding and the availability of aircraft, and largely our aerial monitoring program has gone away. We haven't been able to keep it in the air for the last few years. A subset of that effort has been focused on shipping lanes, and thanks to TL and your board, TL, at PMSA, funding was made available to do what we consider aerial surveillance. It's not quite the scale and scope of a full-blown monitoring effort, but it has enabled us to get up into the sky, fly the shipping lanes within the channel where we're most concerned about ships and whales. And with that information, we have combined it with other whale sightings to trigger the turning on or turning off our seasonal management vessel speed reduction efforts. And this year, I should say, this whale season, I've flown at least monthly, and it's, if we continue up the effort, we could really get to a scale where it really is more of a monitoring program. It is a very good way to cover a lot of water and area and get a sense of where whales might be beyond the geographic scope of the whale watch industry and others out there sharing information with us. It is, again, it's a well-established program. We know how to do it. It is simply funding limited, if not for PMSA's contributions to keep us out there over the last couple of years. And that funding is, it'll last through this whale season, but it's we believe it's an effective way to do the kind of work that we're all interested in, and so that's one that Sanctuary staff would put a check near. Would like to keep doing it. We are always looking for internal NOAA funding, and I'm not sure if anyone has any questions about it. Happy to answer them. But from a staff perspective, it's simply funding limited to maintain it as a annual, rigorous part of how we employ whale conservation efforts. It's also, of course, geographically constrained to inside the channel. Working with the Navy, we did do some flights on the backside, the south side of the island. It is a much larger chunk of ocean, and the more ocean you have to fly, the more time it takes, and thus the more money it costs to do it. And also, we're not quite staffed. We don't have enough staff to, fly on a weekly basis on such a large area. On the East Coast, aerial monitoring has been a big part of the right whale conservation efforts at a scale much larger than our aerial monitoring out here. So that's what we've been doing.
Great, thanks, Sean. So yeah, kind of an abbreviated version of that is in this status gaps work remaining column, which kind of just gives an update on where we are today with these different projects, and also if any of you have been involved in these different research areas and you notice that more work has been done that isn't in this matrix, please let me know so that I can make sure it's as up-to-date as possible. This poem has just some next steps that have been identified by Sanctuary staff and others, and then for some of the different projects, there's a links and literature column which will link to any publications that have come out of these different projects, and that links to the Google Drive folder, which has a full reference library that you guys can access. I sent around the table of contents, which has all the different publications listed. So I would encourage, as you're thinking about research needs, definitely just give the reference library a quick look and see if anybody has already done what you're thinking about proposing.
This is Phyllis. Just one small point, and that this matrix is from the recommendations from the SAC report. But when we're talking about research more broadly, I just want to note that this one, number 1, really says in close proximity to shipping lanes, so that it doesn't, it's silent about things that are shipping lanes like the south side of the islands. I just want to point out that for that reason, this might be somewhat incomplete.
That's a good point, Phyllis. Thanks. And maybe as we're thinking about recommendations moving forward, that should be a separate, or this should be expanded, or that should be a separate thing, is to look at the wider geographic range and south of the islands as well.
And this is TL. I absolutely support that. The other point, John, is weather allowing you to actually get up there and do those things. That's a limitation as well. But yeah, if we could expand this program, ensure its sustainability going forward, and get outside the Channel Islands so that we have a better idea of how to manage this issue, that would be a great thing. We're fully supportive of that.
And so in addition to aerial monitoring, there's been some photographic monitoring, some photo ID work that John Kalmakidis and others have worked on. And also we have, as all of you know, our opportunistic sightings database that's recorded from our citizen scientists, which has been really valuable, but is also, as has been discussed, geographically constrained to within the channel.
And this is John. You can sort of tell me what's appropriate now. The information that's in here, I think, is, maybe, at least in our case, and I think in terms of a number of other research endeavors that are underway, is either out of date or missing, because there have been a number of research programs that I think have relevant data on some of these points, from the SoCal Behavioral Response Study, the Navy's funding that we conduct, that's been going on for 5 years in that kind of broader region. Also that interaction between whales and ships that was published in the McKenna et al. Paper is actually something that's been continuing, and there's quite a bit more added data that we have on that, and are actually gathering at a more rapid pace now that we're using longer term rather than short term tags for that. And I think there are also a bunch of efforts by the kind of Southwest Fisheries Science Center cruises, the Cal Coffee cruises, some other things that aren't quite represented in here as existing data that may just stem from the fact that this was from an older document. I could help bring those up to date, but I just think it maybe focuses a little bit too much on those opportunistic sighting sources and is missing quite a bit of those other studies. The biggest thing, I was curious whether you just want me to suggest this or we want to discuss this, because this was something from the Central California Working Group in considering what are the best sources of sighting information, especially from shipping lanes. Part of the discussion there focused on what I think remains a reality, which is no other platform has greater potential to provide frequent sighting data from exactly the areas we're interested in than the ships themselves. And so at some point, you know, talking about that as a contribution to improving the monitoring on distribution and spatial and temporal occurrence. And maybe I'm missing it. I just didn't see that represented anywhere, you know, in here that to me represents still the golden opportunity out there that has the greatest, you know, potential to fill in, because there's no way when we did the math up there, and I think it holds down here, that you can fund dedicated research surveys to provide the kind of both temporal and spatial coverage that is useful in evaluating whale, something as dynamic as whale distribution, if we're looking at real-time feedback other than kind of the more broad patterns over 10-year periods kind of thing.
Yeah, thanks for that, John. I think that that is a really valuable conversation to have. What sightings data is the most valuable for us, and what data is most valuable for that real-time data feedback, and what is most valuable for building out different models to make them more robust and useful. So I don't know. Yeah, I would definitely like to follow up with you to get some of those studies that you mentioned that might not be included in this mix, and then perhaps we can have a follow-up question about the value of different sightings data either in C-Sketch or at meeting 4. Unless, does anybody else have other thoughts or specific?
This is, yeah, and I fully agree with what John is saying. Maybe the way to tee this up for the October 7th meeting is to have a category of potential shipboard management strategies or onboard management strategies, and sort of tee it up like that. Because I agree with John, we've got the platform in the right place. We just have to figure out how to better use it.
Exactly. And
great, thank you for the idea.
One more thing I was going to just unfortunately say is that I will, you know, once again, meeting 4 is scheduled right during our key field effort, so I will be missing that. So I'll look to try to hopefully work in advance of that meeting to do that. Since, just so you guys know, that unfortunately I will be again not at that meeting.
Yeah, thanks, John. This is Sean. Yeah, we understand, and the staff are happy to work with you to flesh out this table to make sure it captures all the different studies that you're aware of and working on, and then your suggestion for making sure the idea of ship-based platforms of opportunity are employed in whale monitoring.
Great. The second recommendation that was put forth by the SAC is improve understanding of life history, biology, and behavior of large whales in the Santa Barbara Channel. And there's a few different studies that are mentioned here. John, you're tagging studies in particular. Is there any update or information you want to give the working group on that at this time? And if not, no worries.
I'm just, this is John. I was just, oh, I guess that's not till number 3. Okay. I thought I had something here. Can I just go back one other thing and just make one point under number 1?
Sure.
And it just because it's such a frequent point that gets discussed, and it's been so useful on the East Coast, is the acoustic monitoring, number 1 there. And this is just a point I wanted to just describe briefly, because I think it kind of belongs under that, under that kind of gaps or limitations, wherever that would go. And just that, unfortunately, the vocal behavior of blue and humpback whales varies greatly by season, sex, and their behavior. And in an earlier paper, and I don't know if you want to cite it here, it's a paper by Olesen et al. That I'm a co-author on, and I can provide the link on it. It shows how acoustic detections, specifically of blue whales, are not a good predictor of their occurrence in an area, because it's primarily single traveling males that produce these high levels of the loudest calls. And so where you often find high densities of calls, there were not very many whales, and in dense feeding areas of lots of blue whales, there were often very few calls being detected. So anyway, I just wanted to that should be in there somewhere just because it's such a frequent point that gets raised. It's great on a broad regional basis, like on the level that Anna Surovic's paper that's cited here, that's useful, that whales are in this whole general region. It's just not very good on any kind of a more spatial scale, and it's highly biased even on the temporal scale due to that seasonality of calling behavior.
That's great to know. Thanks, John. I'll definitely look at that paper that you mentioned, and we'll include this in the notes. Thanks.
Okay.
All right, great. So yeah, just on the life history, biology, and behavior, there are a few papers mentioned here. So if you want to check any of those out, they have some interesting information. One of the more recent ones showing that blue whales don't really demonstrate behavioral responses to avoid collisions with ships. Again, just recommend that you check out our reference library. Moving down, there was speaking recently to Monica DeAngelis from Fisheries Service about the Southwest region convened a science workshop back in 2010 to focus on data needs to kind of compile whale data and think about modeling. And one of the main recommendations was to collate available whale distribution data to develop a model to determine whale densities in the Santa Barbara Channel. And I know that Jessica Redfern and others have been working on this. Jessica, did you want to mention at all about where your models are now, where you see them going? And also, if you don't want to mention it now, we can talk about it later as well. I think Jessica's on the call still.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, so the first meeting in 2010 resulted in the Redfern et al. Publication in 2013. So that was really the driver of that. We haven't done anything to really update those specific models. I think we've been working on improving blue whale models generally, and we've got some good ideas on better habitat variables we could use. And then John Kalmakidis and I have been looking at maybe ways to combine data sets that I think would result in much finer, being able to predict at a much finer temporal resolution. Does that answer your question?
Great, yeah, thank you. And over here, reports from those working groups are in your reference library, so if you want to check them out, please do. Moving down a little bit, monitor annual distribution of krill. I actually couldn't find that much information on what has been done with that. John or Jessica, do you have any updated information on that? I don't know. Yeah.
Well, I know this is John. One point I think Jay has made a few times has been that it's actually easier to monitor whales than krill sometimes. So how there is a number of studies that have been done on that. Paul Fiedler study a number of years ago that was actually based in the Santa Barbara Channel. And again, I can provide a link to that if you need it, but it talks about that association between krill and whales. And there are a couple of kind of in-press publications that I'm working on with Ari Freelander and the part of the behavioral response team, because part of what we show there is that trying to measure whales' response to things like sonar is actually far more effective when you do include prey data into that model, where we're gathering prey data. It predicts the whale's behavior, and then you can more sensitively look at response to stimuli like sonar, though that would also be relevant in the case of ship strikes. Whether I still think that's not quite, any of those points I don't think are quite getting at something that's a key data gap or key need we have. But just as long as people know there is a bunch of work that has been done and is being done on those associations, though I'm not sure they're of high relevance at this moment to any of our key goals.
Great, thank you. Number 4, continue and improve monitoring efforts to track vessels within the sanctuary within and in close proximity to shipping lanes. The sanctuary, we have our own AIS receiver and can track vessel traffic in-house. So that's really expanded our capabilities and would enable us to kind of do some of that cooperation monitoring that Sean mentioned earlier. So that's great. Number 5, recruit local colleges, universities, and research institutions to assist with research. As you guys probably know, we have a Brun School project going on right now to look at kind of economic valuation. So that's kind of something that's ongoing, and I expect will continue into the future, especially with Sanctuary being located on UCSB's campus. It really allows us to connect with researchers really easily, which is great. And number 6, a big one, seek out additional sources of funding for research. As I'm sure all of you guys know, this is one of the big barriers to research is where the funding is going to come from. So I really encourage you, as you're thinking of new ideas, try to also think about where the money could possibly come from to pay for different research, and just think about the feasibility and implementation constraints that go along with proposing like a big monitoring program or something like that. So those were the main recommendations that came from the SAC ship strike report. But since that was really focused mostly on ship strikes, and this working group has 4 goals, Sanctuary staff identified a few other potential areas of research that work has been done in so far and that might be relevant to the recommendations that come out of this working group. And so one of them is looking at, oh, sorry.
I was just going to jump in here maybe because it potentially has to do, I don't know if you'd have viewed it as encompassed by one of the ones above, but the topic we debated just earlier in this call, which was the relationship between vessel speed and both ship strike risk, whether that's, and I think as TL was trying to point out, I think there are 2 elements of that, which involve both how does speed relate to the incidence of ship strike as well as the lethality of ship strikes. A lot of the past research has focused on that latter question. So anyway, I would suggest that even though you could view it as a part of number 2, that has to do with understanding of history biology, it more has to do with interaction between whales and ships, that maybe it belongs as its own point, and as our debate earlier reflected, I think it's one of the most pivotal research questions I can think of right now that affects the benefits of slowing down ships, one of our key strategies that we've debated.
That's great. Thanks for bringing that up, John. And it'd probably be, I can work on kind of collecting the research that has been done to date on that, and that might help get everybody on the same page, which I know Zach and others are interested in as well. So yeah, thanks for bringing that up. Great. Any other questions or comments about what I've gone over so far? Okay, cool. So yeah, as I was mentioning, safety of navigation, the 2011 Coast Guard PARS study has been brought up a couple times. That's available for you guys to check out in the reference library. Analyze the impacts of ship emissions on local air quality in Santa Barbara County and other coastal counties. There's a paper here that TL pointed me to that looks at NOx emissions in the South Coast Air Basin. That's pretty interesting, and I'm going to work with Mary to see if there's any other relevant research that you guys should be made aware of. Policy research, so looking at the effectiveness of different types of management options that have been put in place so far. So Megan McKenna looked at voluntary speed reductions and their large ineffectiveness so far. And we also had our vessel speed reduction incentive trial where we looked at the feasibility of having an incentive-based vessel speed reduction program. And both of those reports are available for you guys. Another one that has come up in some of our discussion so far is looking at emerging technologies to enhance whale detection and whale avoidance. So, thermal imaging has come up. We've talked about passive acoustic monitoring. I would really encourage you to read this 2008 report from Greg Silver, where they had a workshop to identify and assess technologies to reduce ship strikes to large whales. So that they talk about thermal imaging and a few other of these technologies in that report. So again, in the vein of building off of the work that has been done to date, that's a good one that I would recommend checking out. I think it is, yeah, report of a workshop to identify and assess technologies to reduce ship strikes of large whales. And finally, the kind of what we've also talked a little bit about today is expand whale sighting data used through vessels of opportunity. So the shipping industry and other vessels that could be reporting whale sightings. And that's all I've got for you guys so far. So again, any big things that seem like they're missing? I know I have a few things to connect with John about to get those put into this matrix. Anything else that that people would like to add?
Morgan, this is Kip on the PARS one. I would completely agree with the comment in column B, but the last sentence in column C, traffic continues south of the islands, I mean, it implies that something's, the way I read that sentence, it implies something's wrong. That the western lanes were, because there's traffic south of the islands, the decision was made to have voluntary lanes to organize the 40 miles closest to the ports better. So we consider it a success because when there are multiple vessels, the vessels tend to use them. And when there's just one guy out there, have a ball, sail anywhere you want to. So my question would be, do I put that comment in C-Sketch to recommend changing this, or how would that process work if we just want to make an amendment or recommend an amendment to the spreadsheet?
Well, since you just told me, I can actually just do that. So would you recommend just adding in that column mentioning the western lane and that that ships do tend to use that voluntary western lane when they're transiting in that area?
Yeah, just add that traffic continues south of the islands and ships tend to use the voluntary lanes.
Great, I can definitely do that. Any other feedback?
Just quickly, when you discuss additional studies, obviously there's the recent pilot vessel speed reduction program that should be included. But there's been some port-specific work that, although it may not be directly transferable to the Santa Barbara Channel in totality, it certainly informs what's going on in the southern half of it. I don't know that you need or want to get to that level of detail, but that information is certainly available, almost on a ship-by-ship basis.
With regard to the
emissions profile of the vessels accessing the ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. Do you have access to that information? Would I follow up with you for that?
Well, you can find the general reports, but in terms of getting down to that level of detail, I think you'd have to get permission from the ports or get the data from the ports themselves.
Okay.
But that's all incorporated as part of their inventory.
Gotcha.
It's really a question of how much you want to get into the weeds on this. But
right.
You can get pretty deep if you want to.
Right. Okay, thanks.
Well, that's helpful, TL. I think we can at least add in that we know that the information exists, and then if people want to access it, we can go further steps to get it.
Great. Any other feedback?
Morgan, this is Janet. I'll ask you the same question that I did on the last round, which is, are there any additional places in this research matrix that you are looking for specific additional information from any of our working group members on?
Let's see. Well, I guess yeah, I am going to follow up with Mary to see if there's any air quality research that we want to add into this. That I can do offline. I don't think that I have any other specific questions. John, do you have any other questions you'd like to pose to the group?
No, only that we welcome, John. You have some additional detail that you'd like to see reflected, and we certainly want to capture that. And TL, your suggestions on what to update. So again, our goal is to make this spreadsheet as comprehensive and complete as possible, so that the working group can reflect on it and develop recommendations either for entirely new forms of research and monitoring that need to happen, or encourage continuation of efforts that we are now aware of as they're captured on this form, and forward that along. Even if we're currently doing it, I think, and it is generally adding to a body of knowledge on whales in general, or specifically related to conservation efforts. I think it is always helpful to have working group support, advisory council support to maintain the course on some of our projects. So just because it was recommended in the past, it doesn't mean it doesn't need to be recommended again or added, putting your thumb on it saying, yeah, keep this up. It certainly helps with NOAA to know that these programs and projects have been well vetted and are still supported and moving in the right direction. Or if you have a suggestion how to change the direction, we're all ears to that.
That's helpful, Sean. Thank you.
Yeah. Sorry, just as Sean was talking and I'm looking at the spreadsheet, something did come to mind. This is Christy. You know, we've had some discussion on the forums on CSketch, and I don't know if Coast Guard could do this. It would be great if they could weigh in terms of the safety of navigation situation south of the islands. We've been getting information from the Marine Exchange and the Navy, and they've been inputting information, but if the Coast Guard as a working group member could weigh in on CSketch or other avenues, that'd be really helpful.
Yeah, this is Mr. Link with the Coast Guard. We can certainly take a look at that. A lot of our information, we work side by side with the Marine Exchange, so it would just be, a lot of it would just be duplicate what the Marine Exchange has already compiled, but we can certainly take a look at that.
Great. Thanks.
And this is John. I was just going to suggest it, and I think this could probably best come from Jessica. And again, I don't know if it should be its own line of research or be combined with one of the ones above, but I do think the kind of modeling that Jessica does, and especially highlighting the need for models that integrate data sets together, such as some of the ones listed above, you know, is a maybe a kind of a research activity in and of itself, other than just gathering that kind of data or making sure it's collected. So I think it'd be important to highlight the kind of habitat spatial models that Jessica does, and the need to have those that integrate multiple data sets as a key need.
That's helpful. Great. Thank you, John. We'll flag that. And while we have this line of inquiry open, does anybody have additional thoughts expanding on the information we have in this matrix for additional research needs?
Yeah, this is Jessica, and I really think John made an important point about integrating the data sets, but I also wanted to go back to something that was shared by a couple different members earlier too, about trying to get data that's collected throughout the entire region in a systematic way, and that is staying in the channel and south of the channel. I think that's a pretty important need that we need to have noted.
Got it. Thanks, Jessica. And this is not your last chance to weigh in. We'll be spending a lot of meeting 4 doing this. But any other thoughts while we're still on the phone on additional research needs?
This is because I can't see the whole spreadsheet. The answer may be there, but is there a research item to do a worldwide study of different areas where they've got the problem and the solutions that they have come up with that we then could look? Somebody earlier mentioned New Zealand, and I don't know where else there's this issue. I think I heard once there was a Panama Canal, or in the Pacific side. So the research topic would be do a literature search of other places in the world, so we might get good ideas from that.
Yeah, thanks for that, Kip. This is Sean. To some extent, that has been done and is ongoing. For example, the Advisory Council report in 2009, it had 3 or 4 case studies. That's where we did exactly what you're suggesting. We said, well, how are people dealing with this issue in other parts of the world? We're now on our second Bren project on this issue, and there was extensive literature reviews done in both of those projects. I don't think I'd ever claim we've done an exhaustive global review, but certainly have a good start on that, and I believe we're, especially the other NOAA colleagues on the phone and NOAA contractors, we have a pretty good handle on the areas in which the most work has been achieved. And a lot of that's captured in the reference library that we provided, and again in those other projects I've mentioned. The recommendation is taken to heart, and I think it should be explicitly made, and it's good encouragement to staff and certainly with our academic partners to continue to keep that review up of what's being done elsewhere, and to learn and reflect on those tools that have been employed and how they might fit here. So thank you for that, that we've captured it, and we will continue to synthesize the available work and literature on it. I've mentioned a few sources, and I'll go back to our reference library to see how well it captures all those other places.
To build on that, Sean, and to build on that, Kip, for you too, when we had the presentation on the U.S. delegation from the NOAA legal team, she also listed several different management strategies that are implemented at the IMO level, and so some of those case studies were brought up there too. It's another source.
Yeah, this is Jessica Redfern again. Greg Silver published a great article. It was in 2012 in the journal called Marine Policy, and it was about the role of the International Maritime Organization in reducing vessel threat to whales, and it's a very comprehensive history of actions that have been taken to the IMO by the U.S., Canada, and Spain are the 3 countries listed there. There is a new one by Panama, but the paper by Greg is a really good starting point. So I just wanted to flag that.
Yeah, thanks, Jessica. If we don't have it referenced already, we'll make sure we do and make the group aware of it.
Great.
Yeah, and the Panama example that's been referenced a couple times in the last few minutes, if I understand it, well, 2 things I think occurred. One is they established a TSS off of Panama to guide and direct the traffic going to and from the Panama Canal, and in concert with that, they have implemented what we think is the world's first voluntary speed reduction zone, seasonally established. Well, I shouldn't say the first, because the East Coast has them, but the Panama example is very specific. The action was initiated because of concern over humpback strikes in that region. And again, if it's not already referenced, we can certainly make that available to the shipping working group. I think there's a couple lessons to learn there. Most interesting to me is the IMO process and deliberation that went into creating that. And and certainly of interest too is the reasons why. But how they did it is of interest certainly to me, and the IMO discussions that surrounded that effort.
This is Kathy. Can I jump in? You know, I have my IMO tattoo across my back. So one of the things, and this is broader than the scope of this working group, but I know my friend John Kalamakidis is on the line here. We have these discussions every time one of these processes take place. And I think, again, along the lines of the comment I made earlier in the call, I think we all need to be thinking a little bigger than just one particular geography, although I know our recommendations are focused on that. What I think needs to be done, and we did it with commercial shipping noise and at least got some guidelines out of IMO, is working with the interagency group, which the Coast Guard obviously is going to probably be the lead on it, but to consider trying to get a work plan item placed on the agenda for the Maritime Safety Committee. Because as I said, this is becoming an international issue, but it's local discussions like these that are talking about all the same things that we might be able to think about getting a new work plan item on the IMO agenda, which would actually help the world and not just LA Long Beach. And it's a long process, so I'm happy to work with anybody that wants to take this as a side issue.
Thank you, Kathy. This is Sean, and I'm sure that Stephanie Altman, our NOAA legal counsel and representative to the IMO, and on that delegation that you mentioned, that U.S. delegation, would be all ears to that, and as am I. And we certainly like to change the world one sanctuary at a time. So we are standing by to receive that. And again, a recommendation from this group of that nature through the advisory council, while it might be outside the geographic scope of what we're doing, I certainly see the wisdom in what you're recommending, and understand that maybe it adds weight to that proposal, and if it helps it float through the U.S. delegation to the IMO, then then this process is demonstrating the power of getting involved locally, but thinking bigger. So thank you for that.
Thanks, everyone. Any additional ideas, thoughts on research needs? Okay. Morgan and Sean, anything else you wanted to cover during this webinar before we close it out?
Only thanks from Sanctuary staff. Thank you, Morgan, for compiling all this, and thank you to the working group members that joined us. We welcome your feedback on these documents, again, to make them comprehensive. As you work on your homework before this upcoming meeting and then during this upcoming meeting, keep these research and education ideas in mind. They go part and parcel to whatever comes out of this process. And so thank you for your attention to it. Thanks for the ability to jump on a webinar rather last minute. I know from a staff perspective, we feel that we're making progress, and that when we meet face to face, we won't have to go into exhaustive detail on what we've done to date. More exciting would be a discussion on what to carry forward and what new to add to education and research recommendations.
Thanks, Sean, and we will send out the webinar recording to the full Marine Shipping Working Group so that everybody can access the recording and be up to speed by the October 7th and 8th meeting. So thanks, everyone. Feel free to be in touch with me, Janet, or Morgan, or Grace as you're working through the homework, and if you have any questions, and you'll be hearing from us soon. Thanks so much.
Bye, all.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Take care.